Stop looking for the change, become it. It's become a thread in my life for probably over a decade now when I began writing Color Today Pretty. It's been a cornerstone to how I see my personal life and interactions with others. But when I had the opportunity to read Self Elected by Lisa Wise, I realized that it is a responsibility of business owners as well. Actually, it's a privilege if I were to be honest. Lisa is the owner of a successful suite of property management businesses in the DC area. But as with most people, behind the person is a story. And that story shapes and has shaped her story. Lisa experienced a childhood that was short on housing and security. And instead of continuously looking for it, she found it and now helps others find it too. She became the change the world needed, the world that she needed, and her businesses are built from it, serving people and communities along the way. I am so excited to welcome you into a meaningful conversation Lisa and I had about impact, specifically the impact each one of us has on the world, on business, and with books. I've had the pleasure of reading her book, creating her book marketing plan, supporting her initiatives, and so much more. But beyond any impact I've been able to make and impart on her, she's the one who's left an impact on me. Want to hear why? Well, join us for a conversation that I am confident you will leave ready to self-elect. Hey, I'm Stephanie Feger, and Empower is my middle name. Well, not really, but y'all, it should be. I believe that empowered people empower people, and I'm obsessed with empowering you, the nonfiction author, with impactful marketing strategies and tactics to help you take your important message and share it with those who desperately need it and want it. And here's the kicker, will buy it. I'm the owner and chief strategist of the Empower PR Group and the author of 3 books myself, including my newest one, Make Your Author Impact. Sell more books, increase your reach, and achieve your why. I've been called to merge my love for reading books, writing books, and marketing books to help nonfiction authors with laser-focused strategies and tactics to write books that sell, promote books to those who need and want them most, and build meaningful businesses from empowering messages. Please think of this podcast as your one-stop shop for marketing insights from an author who has been there, done that, and understands exactly where you are. Because guess what? I do. So get your pens ready because I'm ready to empower you. This is the Empowered Author Podcast. Lisa, I am so glad that you are here. In fact, after I had the opportunity of reading your book, it was always a pipe dream for me to have you on this podcast. And when you said yes and were excited about it, I was excited, mainly because of many opportunities we've had to work together. But your book is a beautiful testament of your life story and your purpose. And while I love reading books, Lisa, I read so many. There's very few that stick the way that yours did. So I really love everything that you're about. I'm really excited to talk about how we're making impact in this world, and you're living proof of it. So welcome to the Empowered Author Podcast.
Oh, it is a pleasure to be here, Stephanie.
Well, you are a gem, and your book is too. And I feel like we need to start the conversation by talking about your story and how you got where you are and how you are leveraging this beautiful responsibility you have to continue this impact. So I know that's pretty broad, but can you take us back years ago and bring us up to today and all of the beauty that has happened in between?
Yeah, some of that origin story. It's been a windy road, to be honest, and I think our past certainly inform our future, and you can look back and say, okay, there were certain catalyst moments or periods of time when I can see kind of what that path was going to look like. And my story started as a kiddo growing up all over Western mountain towns, and those towns were really big on beauty, but they were really light on diversity and difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted a different path for myself.
Yeah.
By the time I got to college, I lived in 23 different homes across 6 different states and 12 small towns and cities. And I landed in Arizona, Tucson, and I had my wacky Aunt Susan called and said, you have a cousin Richard in town. And I said, well, no, I don't know. I've never heard of Richard. And she said, oh yeah, he's my first cousin once removed, or my first cousin. So he's your first cousin once removed. And I was like, oh, okay. He's a total mystery to me. And I thought, well, I'll look him up because he probably has a lovely wife and he probably has a nice house and he probably has warm food.
Yeah, and he would offer you a place to stay, right? Or a place to eat.
Exactly. So, like any good college student, I was looking for a good warm meal.
Who
And
isn't?
I called Richard, and we arranged to meet at a residential intersection in downtown Tucson, which is really peppered with really beautiful, adobe row houses and these guest houses that will be behind them. One of Richard called home, and that was not the what I was expecting when I pictured cousin
Did you
Richard.
expect him in the suburbs, not in the downtown city?
Correct. Yes. And your idea of what a 40 something, gentleman might, whatever life we were imagining for anybody
Yeah.
at that time, which was 1990. And I pull up in my kind of junky silver Honda Civic, and he is standing on the corner. And I thought, oh, I'm definitely surprised again. This is not the Richard I was expecting. And he had tight fitting jeans and a black leather jacket, and he was just resplendent, right? He had a broad, mischievous smile, and I'm positive he was really stoned. And he just waves me down, and it was just love at first sight. We were so connected from the moment we crossed paths. And with Richard, I always felt, oh wow, I'm home with him. We
Oh,
were instant friends. There was no home cooked meal, but he taught me everything I needed to know about desert living and frankly queer culture. I'd never been exposed to or had a relationship with anybody that was LGBTQ, and to have that person be a relative, to have that person be close to me, having grown up living in 23 different places, that is a traumatic experience,
I
and
can only
trauma
imagine.
absolutely informs our lives and our life trajectory. And for me, I could have moved into a scarcity, like hold on to everything you have, protect all your, and I thought, no, in order for me to solve for the security problem that I have, wouldn't it be even better if I could solve for other people's security problem? And that seemed to really click and make sense. Like my economic engine has always been generosity, which may sound counterintuitive, but I believe putting good things out in the world means you get some of that back. And I've always felt like if you can help two people with one thing, then that's an easy calculus, right? It's simple math. I believe that everyone is entitled to dignified housing. I believe that should be a basic right. And it should have been my basic right, frankly. And so I'd self elected to pursue a life of abundance and justice. And for me, that meant starting a family of real estate management companies that today we manage $2.5 billion in residential real estate in Washington, D.C. by caring a lot about where people live and what those experiences are like, because we're working with people at home. And that's an honor and a privilege. And we don't look at it as a bottom line or margins or, we are a partner in our residents' homes. And that is, to me, one of the most important roles there are in the residential real estate industry. And we overlook and undervalue and dismiss the value of the resident experience so much. It's the negative landlord paradigm has always been in play. And I'm like, what if you just turn this around and you actually walk into those relationships caring about outcomes instead of caring about bottom line? I wonder if that would be more profitable. I've always run my businesses that way, and I always will. People ask what happened to Richard. Richard came to my house in the desert, and we spent tons of time together. And it was unusual for him to stop by. And I opened the door, and it was a typical hot inferno of a day in Tucson. And I looked at his face and I thought, oh, Richard's sick. The telltale signs of AIDS was all over his face, literally. He'd never shared that diagnosis with me. And it was because he couldn't, right? He had used that armor he created to protect himself, because being HIV positive and being a man who loved men was taboo and it was dangerous. And I found that so unjust. I got lucky, and Richard and I got to spend 2 years together as I cared for him. And it was the longest, best conversation of my life. And he was a total pain in the ass. It was pre-internet, and I was like the original search engine for him, driving all around town looking for the particular anchovies he wanted. But that was a magnificent experience, and I cherished that time, and it changed me. And he had two wishes for me before he died, and he sort of like handed me his whole estate the day before he died. He's like, okay, can you take care of all these things? Luckily, I had been planning for that, even though he was like hoping to live, right? To see him to the very last day, hoping to live. And I hoped for that too, but I knew it wasn't in the cards.
Yeah.
Richard asked me to do two things. He said, Lisa, I want you to take the lease on my garden apartment, and I want you to take my 1993 Honda Civic, which was a huge improvement over my 94 Honda Civic or 84 Honda Civic. And I thought about that garden apartment because it was really one of the few places I'd felt unconditional love, where I felt a sense of home and safe. But I also knew it was time for me to live in a home that I own. So I did what any good entrepreneur does. I sold that Honda Civic for
I'm
$8,300.
so proud of you for doing that, girl.
Thank you. It was the best decision I ever made against someone's will. I went home and I called my very last landlord and I said, "You should sell me this duplex because you have no business managing it from Australia." And he said, "Yeah, I agree." And we faxed things back and forth after I got a kit from the library on how to buy a house. And we had no agents, and I paid $83,000 for that house, and it transformed my life, and I leveraged that to become, and it was a whole house. I had two sides to the duplex, and it changed the course of my life. And I'm forever grateful for how those things evolved and unfolded. And I'll quickly tell the last bit of the story. But people say, "Hey, Lisa, was there anything other than the car and the lease that you took from Richard's home?" And I did take one thing. Richard would rest on his bed quite a bit. And when you think bed, you think actual bed. But Richard slept on a platform, which was a platform that he had made by monks. And it was just a very simple platform. It was his bed, but it was a platform.
Oh
And he
God.
would put this, like, it was just foam. It wasn't even a foam mattress, it was just foam. And he would just lie on it. And I was like, you're so weird, but you are Richard. And so that is who you are, and you're an eccentric guy. I took the bed and the platform bed. It moved around with me since he's died. And when I knew we were going to have a baby, I thought, okay, I'm going to put Richard's bed in that room, and that will be a bed that our son can grow into. And he did. When he was ready for a bed, we plopped him over into Richard's bed. And I have tucked that little boy into that bed for the last 9 years. And where he is safe, right? And he is sound, and he has a totally different experience. He also has a real mattress on the bed, and he's completely grown out of it. So it's time to move the bed. But that, I hope, sort of summarizes where I am, and what orients me to building a family of management companies and businesses that are oriented in justice, because I am more trusted than a politician as a business owner. So then what is my responsibility slash opportunity to make a difference in people's lives and in the world?
It's such a beautiful story. And, every time I've read it, I've heard you speak of it, I've worked closely with you on all of it. And yet every time I hear you share it or hear your story, something else pops out to me. And this concept of home is really important. I mean, I think of my own kids, right? They can they're thank heavens they're really lovely when they're not in the house to everybody else, and they come home and they're little, you know, drive you crazy. But that's because they feel safe here, right? Like they can take off any facade. When people invite you into their home, that's a very intimate experience. There's something different about home where you can be what what is beyond the filter and beyond what anybody else wants you to do. It's just you. And caring for people in that place makes absolute alignment and sense in your kind of business model of this just world and this social justice everybody deserves, right? It's just really beautiful. But it took me back to my grandma, who I wrote about in my first book quite a lot. She was a woman who was just amazing. She had very little to her name, Lisa, at all. I remember growing up, she couldn't even afford to buy us Christmas gifts. I didn't know this until I was older, that my mom was the one buying the gifts and giving it to my grandma. But she, when she could pull money together, she would buy me a $10 bin of popcorn, and that would be my Christmas. And it was my favorite, right? Because it meant so much to her. But when she passed, I got her candy bowl, which was a part of the welcoming part of her small apartment. She did not own that apartment, but this small little piece of her that she got at a yard sale, I'm sure for 25 cents. But it was this welcoming gesture. Like, she was the grandma with the candy bowl. Like, it was just a big part of it, right? And I look at knowing kind of her trajectory in her life, where when she started to get a little sicker, she went to subsidized housing, and she was taken care of there. But I look at all of it, and I just wish that I could have given more and done more for her, right? Like, she was a big cornerstone of who I am. But what I loved about her, and I see in parallel with you and with your stories, is you have reason when you look at your past to be frustrated and become immobilized by it. My grandma had plenty. I know you have plenty, but you don't. And she didn't. Instead, you're like, you know what? I'm going to do what I can with what I have. I'm going to love people and give to people and give back in my community. And I'm going to be the best and do the best because I'm going to take those learnings as fertilizer to help grow something that the world needs. And you have been able to do that. You've been able to create multiple businesses that are not only serving the employees but the communities at large. And you do it in such a beautiful way. Like I love when you said, well, I saw a challenge and I thought, well, I might as well fix it. I mean, most people don't do that, Lisa. Of course, you're an amazing entrepreneur who does, but I just think it's proof that anybody can do something. And that's I think the underlying thread of self-elect, which is the cornerstone of your book. So tell us a little bit about the the social justice element of you and your business and your book and why and how all of that collides.
I think there's a lot of benefit to have not gone through any kind of traditional business education. I've
Ditto.
never been in a business class, and I learned everything I know about business by being a consumer and
Wow.
reading Inc. magazine. Um,
I love it. Which you've contributed to now, by the way, right?
yes, exactly, yeah. Um, and there's value in both approaches for sure. But I think for me, what I appreciated about building a business was that it was just dealer's choice. I got to do it however I wanted, which meant I could take it. I got to make choices not based on a formula, but on a value system.
Yeah.
The formula would have been, if I had started, for me to look at what's my customer acquisition cost, what's the lifetime customer value, what do I put in to get something out predictably, and I was like, and I didn't have any of that background or frame of reference, so I'm like, I think more good business gets more business. That was my formula.
I love it.
And it worked, right? So it's like, if I have $2,000 to spend on marketing, do I want to take an ad out in a popular blog,
Yeah.
or do I want to take $1,000 and two times sponsor organizations and support them and give them visibility through our social media channels and build rapport and support for community at the same time? Same $2,000, but $1,000 and the other $1,000 is doing something that helps someone else
Yeah.
versus just line a pocket. Same outcome, probably my strategy, probably better.
Yeah.
Because over time, there's no cumulative impact when you're doing spot advertising. There is cumulative impact when you're building relationships
Mhm.
and building reputation. And we
Yes.
were able to lean into that in a way that I've really not seen any company do in the same way, but I see companies trying to do it now,
Yeah.
because being a social justice oriented company is a differentiator, and differentiators are part of a secret sauce.
Yeah.
And I tell people, the world is trying to figure out what we figured out naturally. I can back into a lifetime customer value analytics and approach, but most people can never figure out what the secret sauce is. They all have the hamburger, and
Mm.
I might need to rearrange my hamburger a lot and figure out how we're going to operate and do a lot of trial and error. But I've always bet, and I believe, and my book I think illustrates, that the way we've done business is the most streamlined, the most ethical, and the
Mm.
most impactful. And I believe it has led to a greater degree of success. So we get choices about where we spend money. We get choices about how you do your hiring. You get choices about how you pay and reward your staff. You get choices about how you're showing up and supporting community. I just make choices really simply, like, this is the right thing to do. I do that. That is my brand. And people are attracted to brands that are really consistent, clear, and bold. And I chose to
Yep.
be that versus skimming out, like, what isn't in it for me. If that's my lens, I'm not doing what I need to be doing in the world.
Mm. Well, and in a buyer's market world now where we are inundated with so much competition, people are choosing to align their purchasing power with those companies that align with their value systems. And so hiding your values or not having any values or the business having values but the people don't have the same values, like none of that, that's just more work, more time, more money, right? Whereas if you lead with being a company and a leader and a team that cares about people and cares about people where those people are and how you can do it, like you are living living proof that there's not one way to win. Everybody can actually win.
Mhm. And frankly, it's not that hard to rethink how you're making certain choices. They don't have to be big choices. When I
Yeah.
wrote the book, I was very intentional about using case studies and talking about companies that were very relatable. I
Yeah.
talked about hardware stores. I talked
Mhm.
about dry cleaners. I talked about flower shops. I talked about sandwich shops. And I talked about the Impossible Foods brand and like fake meat. These are all things that most of my readers, I hope, have either consumed or been consumers of, and have a visual relationship with. They understand what it's like to be a basic consumer going in and buying a hammer or fill in
Right.
the blank there. And
Right.
I did that very intentionally because for anyone that's trying to understand or wonder whether or how to interject and infuse justice into their work, it doesn't have to be a big lift or even like a three-dimensional effort. It could just be that you choose to buy locally for some of your things versus not. I mean,
Right.
it can be those small things that can also set trend, and you can also repurpose those activities to share with your audience, your consumers. Hey, you know what? We've decided this year to shift 50% of our supply purchase and spend to our local suppliers. That feels great. And you know what? That is a way of sharing out your value system, piquing interest, getting people to say, that's who I want to do business with. So you're it's a there are two wins. You're keeping your money local, and maybe you'll spend 10% more, but you're also not driving as far. So there are all of these just
Right. It's a
intersecting
trade.
advantages of yes. So there's efficiency inherently built in to some avenues or pathways to being a more just business. And so you have to study every element of it. It's really fun too. So we made an intentional decision many years ago to try and really eliminate as much spending as we could from any of the big box stores or online stores and move all of our spending to the local Ace Hardwares, which is a cooperative and they're all locally run and owned. That moves another quarter million of dollars of revenue into the local economy, 68 cents of which stays local when the typical dollar, only 18 cents or so stays in our local economy. That's really easy to do.
Yeah.
And it's a lot faster to get in and out of an Ace than a Home Depot.
Preach it, girl. It is. And when you are it just I think it just goes back to when you're investing in people. You're investing in people. We've talked about, and your book talks about, that people buy from people, people connect with people, and you as a business owner and a company get the opportunity to serve people, and I think you do that all holistically. So your book is called Self-Elected: How to Put Justice Over Profit and Soar in Business. It's beautiful, and it has this beautiful cover of you on a horse. So I want you to share a little bit about that, because the people might be going, "What? How does that have anything to do with being self-elected?" But it does, and I would love for you to share that story.
Oh, thank you. I would love to. And Stephanie, you talked about your grandmother, so we have that in common. And as that kiddo rolling through all those different spaces as a kid, one of the places I landed fairly often was at my grandmother's house, my father's mother. And she and my grandfather were Jewish sheep ranchers in Colorado. They had lands and horses, and they raised sheep. And my grandmother was just the kindest, warmest, most extraordinary person I'd ever met. And when she was in her 40s, she decided to take up painting. And they had a house with the living room and balconies on the top floor, and the kitchen, everything else was on the bottom floor. And when they built that house, they included a studio for her, like kind of a larger than life studio. We would wander the property and feed the sheep and do the work of having a working farm, basically a ranch. And we'd look up at the birds. And so from and she painted birds. And so there was that sort of wandering of the land and feeling safe and really feeling a connection between nature and that relationship. And my grandmother had a retired quarter horse that you see me on, in that red jacket and the cowboy boots, which were probably like 8 sizes too big, but I insisted I could fit into them.
Yes.
And she would saddle that horse up for me, and I would go out and ride. And he hated me because otherwise, all he did was like eat carrots and apples from
He didn't
grandma.
want to work. He didn't
Yeah,
want
no,
to
he
work.
was in retirement squarely. And he's like, I don't get this. When this kid comes, I got to work, and I don't like it. Ironically, and maybe it was a foreshadowing, that
Mhm.
horse's name was Mortgage.
Yeah. Funny is that. And did your grandma name that horse, or did it come with the name?
He probably came with the name.
Yeah, he probably did. That's total foreshadowing.
And maybe this all comes full circle from the first story. The wacky Aunt Susan that I was talking about, sent me that photo because my grandmother passed away. She said, "I think you'd like these photos." She sent me that photo just a handful of months before I needed to work on the book cover. And I just looked at it. I was like, "There's the cover."
Are you kidding? Wow. Yeah, no, all of that is very interwoven. That's the beautiful tapestry of our lives, planting
Mhm.
things along the way. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So your book came out in the end of 2022, right? The fall of
Yeah.
2022 or fall winter, and it's had some really great success. And I've had the pleasure of working with you on the book, and it has been an absolute joy, especially since a part of my challenge in life is to help authors make an impact. And here you are helping business owners and businesses and people make an impact all through self-electing. And I just think it's brilliant. I think the concept of self-elect, if listeners today haven't picked up on it, it's this really simple but poignant purpose of don't just go around looking for the change, people. Like, you can be it. Like, right
Mhm.
now, not in 5 minutes or 50 days, or like right now, you can do it. You could do
Mhm.
it all the
Yeah.
time. So I just have to thank you for letting me be a part of it, because getting to make an impact in such a meaningful way means a lot to me. But you are making an author impact, because, like I said, when I was reading your book, I was taking notes personally. Usually, I'm taking notes to help with your marketing plan. I was doing that too, but I'm like, okay, it's December, and this is the stuff I'm going to start thinking about with my own business. How can I start putting money away to support a nonprofit or create one, or all these things that I have always wanted to do, but never even thought about. So some of our brains just aren't even hardwired to think like that. You have to be
Yeah.
intentional to start thinking that way. So I just want to thank you for that, and talk to me a little bit about what it is. What is it like? You've been making an impact in your business, but now you've got a book. Like, what's that feel like in the process?
It's hard to say. It's hard to explain, right? Because I don't see it from the other side. I see it through the lens of 3 years of hard work and candidly thinking, oh, maybe I really have a lot to say, but I don't know that I'm a confident writer in that way. And I don't really know how to write a book. And so I'm going to get a ghostwriter. And that really didn't work out. And I ended up writing the book. And there's the imposter syndrome is real.
It is.
That struggle is real. And I'm like, do people really want to read this? I mean, it's tricky. So I'm seeing it from the self-critical imposter perspective and lens, while other people are seeing it from a wow, she published a book. And I can't, that's
Yeah.
really hard for me to see it from that perspective.
Mhm.
But I can say when the wins do come through, when the feedback does come through, I think, oh wow, this is not a small deal. This is a big deal. And I want to savor the moment. I don't want to let this sort of fall by the wayside. I have to be very intentional about making sure that it gets where it needs to go. It doesn't just happen. People don't just knock on your door and say, "Did you happen to write a book? How can I help you?" Or how can we get it out there? You have to be bold and you have to be confident and be willing to talk about yourself in ways that are not necessarily self-congratulatory, but confident.
Yeah.
And I don't lack confidence, but there's still that. Ugh, do I really know what I'm doing? I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't learn to do any of these things. I tell people it's a miracle I learned to read, let alone write. Given when you move that many times, you do not get a good education. Full stop.
Mhm.
And I really was like miss huge gaps in like my learning. So no, I mean, I accidentally wound up in special ed as a kid because I just was not on track. Given that history and past, it has really been hard for me to like kind of just bask in the joy of that. There's also a lot of work when you hit the ground, right? So you write it and there's no like sailing through. It's like now the work really starts because you don't want to write something and then fall down on that, getting it out there.
Yeah, it's the what I tell people. You think that after the book is published, it's done, and that's just where it begins. And I know marketing is something I like to do. It's not something most authors enjoy. So I realize I actually. So Lisa, I have way too much fun. I start marketing the books before I write them because I get excited about what I could do, and then I'm like, I got to go actually write the book. But but where you yes, bask in the joy of knowing that you have made an impact. And this is the beautiful thing, and also the finicky thing about impact in general, right? It's not something that you can ever fully know, especially when you write a book. You will never know who's all read your book. You will never know how they're changed from it. Most people, it becomes a part of their DNA and their own tapestry, and it just changes them without them knowing. And so you can't ever qualify or quantify it, but it is happening, and it's a beautiful thing. I know that to be the change that you want to see in others, and you're doing that both in your business and how you're serving your employees, in your family. It's even how you and I've been working together. I tell so many people, if I just, the world needs a lot more Lisas. The world needs that, because big change can happen from it. So I just want to thank you. I thank you for being on the podcast today. Thanks for sharing your story. But thank you for doing a hard thing of writing your story down so that people that you wouldn't get to meet on the daily can be changed by it.
Oh, thank you. You've been a pleasure to work with. If you ever need an endorsement, let me know.
You're so sweet. You are so sweet. And, I do want to just, before we close out, I want to share this, because you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk, right? Like, there are people that say that they care about people and communities and the people they work with and all of that stuff. But even, not only do I see you doing it in your community and with your team, but how you treat even me is beautiful. And I see it. That is honest and real and feels so good. And your kindness runs as a through with everything. And so I think it's just proof that you opted to do this not because profit was ever your end goal, right? It was people, it was change, it was impact. And because of that, you will succeed. Right? Like, because of that, you have succeeded. And because of that, others can too. When you lead with the right thing, people want to follow, people want to support, people want to invest, and then people become inspired to be a part of that change. And in a world that needs a bit more of that, this is a great testament to the fact that it's possible. So thank you, Lisa, for that.
Oh, absolutely. Love fest.
Yes, love fest. If you are a business owner, this is a book you need to read, and pronto. Add it to your TBR list. If you are leading a team, pick it up. You will become a better leader from it. If you are passionate about the convergence of justice in our communities and our businesses, Lisa's book will remind you it's all possible. And when people self-elect, more can be done than ever thought possible. Whether you live on a farm like me with horses in the backyard that unfortunately aren't named mortgage, or live in a city like Lisa that's filled to the brim of hustle and bustle, self-electing is something anyone can do any time of the day in any role that we have. We are all poised to leave the world a better place than we found it. And that includes how we run businesses, how we treat people, how we serve our communities, and so much more. Add Lisa's book to your shopping cart. It's called Self-Elected: How to Put Justice Over Profit and Soar in Business. You'll thank me and Lisa later. It's such a pleasure to support authors who have books, and books that the world really needs. Maybe your book is one of them. I'd love to have a marketing plan VIP day with you and help you find those who need your message most. But let's start with a chat. Reach out. Let's have a connection at empowerprgroup.com/connect. Author friend, thank you for listening today and saying yes to becoming empowered. As you know, I'm a believer that empowered people empower people. Lisa and I have empowered you to self-elect. Now it is your turn to empower others.